Hi everyone. It's my first meetup with a dog in it. So if I get if I phase out or get distracted, like blame the dog. Um, and yeah, thanks to Marco and the team and Tony for having me here. We've been trying to do this for a while. I'm grateful that it finally happened. I really am. Um, to start, okay, let's see. Okay, context. My name is Kene. I'm from Nigeria. I'm a product designer. Um, Long-term volunteer at something called Usable and founded like a nonprofit called For Humans by Humans. I'm going to talk a bit about them uh, as we go along, right? Um, I wanted to start out with some background into like what my first computer was, or at least like why I started my journey into tech, right? Um, Someone showed up to the school I was attending at the time, and he was the child of a university professor who was a university professor of computer science, and he filled my head with stories about computers. This was before I saw a computer, and he drew a keyboard on a piece of paper, not this one, but something similar, and they ended up telling me stories about computers. The most fascinating one that like is like the at least it was an oversimplification, but he had explained that if someone who understood hardware got married to someone who understood software, they can build computers all by themselves, right? And that story kind of stuck and kind of started driving the curiosity. So I started my career like as a freelancer, primarily I started as a programmer, eventually transitioned to becoming a designer. Started working for this organization called Co-Creation Hub, which is the kind of like the largest hub like in Africa, like with locations in Nigeria, Rwanda, and now Kenya. But the project I wanted to highlight was one of my favorite things that I worked on at the time. It's something that was called NigeriaElections.org at the time. It was something that helped us keep track of election results as it was happening. It was the first time it was built in the country, and this was in 2015. And it was just one of those things that felt really important at the time for people my age, people in a certain demography who wanted to bring transparency to our system, at least in my country. And that was really like one of my highlights. Fast forward a few years, I went to Booking.com. And in the context of Booking.com, a lot of my work was around helping validate like early business ideas. So essentially, like I started off in new product development, which is the business comes and gives you a problem, and then you and your team go and find data, product insights to validate that problem. If it's successful, another team takes it on and builds. If it's not, you kill it and try again. Eventually ended up in marketing, on the marketing side of the business, and started building tools for affiliates. So if you were a blogger, if you were someone who owned a large travel community, you could essentially monetize your community to at least resell like Booking.com inventory with different tools that we were building. Um, Today I work at IKEA. My job title is senior product designer, but I would be able to tell you how to assemble this chair. At least that's not the kind of product design like I'm able to do right now at IKEA. Right now, like my career at IKEA, like in the last a year, almost exactly a year and a few days, really, has started off with looking at how IKEA can improve our multi-channel experience. IKEA is one of the few companies in the world that has presence online and a significant presence offline. And then customers also don't just shop on the web, they don't just shop in the stores. Customers transition through through these different channels. So my job and the job of the team I currently work with is to really focus and enhance the experience for those customers who want to perhaps start their journey on the web and end up in our stores, or start their journey in the stores and complete it on the web. So, oh yeah, something else I do a lot of mentorship and helping like designers get into the career path. So I have multiple conversations with designers at different stages of their career who are trying to perhaps access a new level, or just solve some dilemma that they're currently going through. In 2014, I started the design community, so I am very, very much invested in community, which is why I was really excited to be here in this small, cozy space. This is my jam. So I do a lot of work around helping people get into design as a craft, but also like helping elevate the design education across my continent. Last but not the least, something I've been spending the last 18 months on is building with my hands. These are, like, I call them ulo. Ulo means home in my language. These are boards that are artistic, but also like inherently functional. And the idea behind ulo, which started with lots of YouTube videos, into now doing carpentry as a fun thing that is slowly gravitated towards a business, is to build like artistic boards that you can put in your home, but also improve the acoustics of whatever room it's in. So the boards you see are just like some examples of that. That was fairly time. So I'm going to ask a question because I'm trying to get a sense of who is in the room. Actually, I'm going to ask 3 questions or 3 statements, right? If it's true, like if when a question comes up, if it's true, just raise your hand. You don't need to say anything. And then just to get a vibe. All good? Okay, so first, coins, tokens, blocks mean more to me. Show of hands, anybody? True? Okay. The second question, I've thought about prompts this week. Prompts. Okay. Do you agree with this statement? Everyone is a designer. Show of hands. Okay. The people who raise their hands are in the minority. just saying. Okay, I mean, let's get to our here. Design is a team sport. You raise your hand as well? Yeah, I said I agree with it. Okay, okay, that's good. Okay, so the reason why we're all here, well, just so that we are all like in agreement, right? Like we have the same baseline. So I would describe like team compositions like one of these options that's on the screen. And with that comes an assumption that everyone in this room belong to a team that uses one of these formats. In the case of centralized formats, is that these are teams where the manager you report to used to have your job title. Like you report to a manager that is of the same craft as you. So designers will report to design managers, engineers will probably report to engineering managers, that kind of thing. Decentralized teams, it's a bit different. So these are multidisciplinary teams, whereby if you're in a team, you have designers, developers, analysts, QA people, all like working in the same team. Leadership here looks like a team lead, right? That's usually the job title you'll find in those kind of organizations. And then the last is the hybrid. Hybrid is a mix of both, I guess. If you like, it's still the same, whereby people have like straight reporting lines, but there's a separation between craft and like product leadership. And in that case, you'll probably have a product leader or something like that. The hybrid one is the one that we currently use, but most of my like adult career, like I've been working like in decentralized teams. So like I just figured I should put this. So when I talk about teams in this context, like I'm just talking about living and experiencing as an individual contributor, like in one of these settings. All good? Okay. Okay. I figured I should start with another story. I feel like I'm talking too much. um, which is the story of essentially like why this talk exists, really, like how this talk came to be. So I'd gotten a new job, and like everybody's happy. I'm especially happy in a new team, new challenge. You're giving your task, you're happy and ecstatic, and it's a new problem space. So I go off, do what designers do because you do the research, do screens, go out, validate, share the reports with my team, design the screens, hand it off to them, right? And I felt like my job was done, and I was pretty ecstatic about going through that process. And then I came on vacation to here, Croatia. I went to Split, played Vis, and I think Dubrovnik at the time. We spent 2 weeks here. Life was good. I thoroughly enjoyed my time. And then went back to work. And yeah, everything was literally on fire. I mean, not literally, but the work that I had done and handed off, that's in my head, and the shared understanding I had with my product manager before I'd gone on vacation, was that it was fine. But clearly, like by the time I came back, like everything has gone in different directions because like the product, like the design had changed, and it wasn't just like visual design. It wasn't that that they took off a button here or they changed the font. Like it wasn't the small things. It was like fundamentally like they changed the direction that they wanted to go. And I'd spent a lot of time battling with trying to understand the new direction because it didn't necessarily align with what the research has borne out that led to the initial design that I've handed off. But it also didn't align with some of the assumptions that I had about the goals for the product, things we wanted to do, and all of that. So so I'd spend a lot of time pondering this, talking to a few designers, trying to understand processes and what went wrong. And the truth is, like the way the product was designed, like was not inclusive, and that was the conclusion. Because as designers, when like you see or hear conversations around inclusive design, it is usually framed from the viewpoint of including the users, including the end users and the stakeholders of the product. And the stakeholders in that context is usually like the end users or the people impacted by the problem that you're trying to solve. So like I'd reflected on this over time, and eventually, through talking to people, eventually came up with a framework that I have adopted and keep advocating for as ways to approach this in order to prevent this from happening. So this talk is essentially like the viewpoints, a biased viewpoint of a designer in a product design team trying to advocate and influence change in terms of how people approach collaboration. So there are like three main pillars, if you like, of the framework, right? That I've like highlighted as the areas that needed to I should have paid attention to. And in each of these areas, upon reflection, I could see how I'd failed in like taking the steps that would have quote unquote guaranteed the success of the product, or at least the version of the product that I had and we had a shared understanding that we're building. And the first bit is relationships, right? And I included this quote: "Greatness is an agency of others." Is this quote by a professor, Scott Galloway, who is a marketing professor at NYU Stern. He's also like a really good podcaster. If you like podcasts, you should listen to him. If you like podcasts that you're interested in tech and business, I should caveat that. The podcast is called Pivot, but he talks about greatness is in the agency of others, and it's something that he says a lot. And when he say the agency of others, it is something that points to our ability to do good things, our ability to achieve greatness. So in my language, there is a saying that says "Ofonye aha emohia." Like I will translate, right? It just means that one person cannot make a forest, right? Like as you, no matter how big you want to be, you can never be a forest all by yourself. You need others. And this same saying gets translated in different like African cultures or different languages. You can see a variant of it in the saying that if you want to go quick, go fast, but if you want to go far, go together, go with a team. Or you can see it in illustrations such as when they bring a broomstick to you, like when they get a broom and then ask you to break it. If you take one off, you can break it, but if you try to break the whole thing, it's a bit more challenging, right? And that's the whole point of the like building the agency of others. It's about trying to find ways to build relationships in the context of the people that you're going to be working with. And the way that I've like managed to figure out how to approach that is in a question called "How can I help?" Right? The approach is when you join a new team, whether you're already in an existing team, there is a question of how can I help, and it's not how can you help the team, it is how can I help the person next to me, right? Like, so if I'm in a team, or currently I'm in a team with another designer, a few other developers, an analyst, a product manager, my goal is to try and understand how can I help the designer, how can I help the manager, how can I help the developers? Because by trying to understand that, by building those relationships, you're able to then, or at least I'm able to then try to find things that are important to them, things that are like of importance to the team, things that are important to them as individuals, and things that are important, and why those things are important to them, really. Because if you are able to have those conversations, articulate what matters to them, you're able to start understanding why they take the decisions they do, why is the team going in this direction. If you end up talking to your product manager or the person who takes care of the business side of things, you also then understand why certain decisions have to be in the way that those decisions are. So in the case of building a relationship, like the cheat question is how can I help? And this question came about like if came about from this series. It's called New Amsterdam, whereby this doctor walked. Have anybody seen New Amsterdam here? Yeah. You understand? Whereby this doctor walked. So he was a new chief resident in the hospital. Anyway, he walks in, and then he asks people, "How can I help?" And the question frames it, gives people like the space to actually tell you what they want you to do for them, as opposed to you like building your own assumptions of what you should do to help them move forward. So how can I help? Like, it's a question that I have personally adopted and I've advocated for in the team, in the one-on-ones, and the people that I've worked with, I've mentored with, to try and adopt as a way to frame conversations with the people around them. Because if you can understand the goals of your team and you're able to advocate for your team, it makes it much more easier for you to then convince your team going forward in terms of what you are able to do. So if I look at the framework of an entire organization, like my primary constituency is my team. They are the people I want to take care of, not the whole organization. Because if my team is working towards the organization's goals, if I'm able to make my team successful, it means that I can make my unit or my department or my business unit successful. It means that I can contribute to making the organization successful. But if the framing starts at wanting to make the organization successful, it can be so big that it's not clear for you as an individual how like the actions that you want to take is going to make impact in those settings. The second bit is inclusion. And this is a quote by Renee Myers, who is, I think, the diversity and inclusion like VP at Netflix. She basically described diversity and inclusion, or she described inclusion as diversity is being invited to the party, inclusion is being asked to dance. And if you've been to conferences or seen all those DAI talks, you probably see some of this, right? Or you've probably seen this quote somewhere. And being like, and her message in the diversity is being invited to a party is just a way to describe how companies would invite people with diverse backgrounds into, the organization. Oh, and then say, oh, we're hiring, we're diverse, we're a diverse place to work. But then the same group of people don't have input into what then happens or how they evolve within the organization, which means they aren't being asked to dance. Excuse me. So that was the whole point of being asked to dance. And what this means is essentially asking the people in the team about how they want to participate in your design process, or at least opening up your design process in a way that welcomes conversations, welcomes interactions, and welcomes feedback. If what this then looks like in practice is then as a like from the viewpoint of a designer, this means that if I am working on a research, for instance, the first time my team will participate in the research isn't like at the end, like because it's my job as a designer to do the research. Like that's not at the end is not the time they see it. They see the research at the point where I am formulating the questions for the research, right? They know that these are the questions we want to ask. They try to understand, or at that point, they're able to contribute to the questions, but they're also able to participate. Currently at IKEA, like if I were going to do a research in a particular store, for instance, like the way my team is currently set up, at least with the level of trust that we've built, like the developers are going to participate in the same process, right? The developers aren't expected to lead the research, right? Because it's not the core competency area. But by participating in the process and having FaceTime with customers, it helps make it easier to land big ideas. It helps make it easier to communicate to them and say, oh, like customers find this thing disturbing. It makes it easier and it makes them more willing to actually accept to make some big changes that, especially when those changes have some significant technical depth to them. Being asked to dance ties really closely to the bit about relationships, right? If you have invested the time in building relationship with the people that you work with, or the people that are contributing together with you to the same goal, then it means that at the time that you are trying to get them to participate in your design process, you already understand what they care about. So it's not a question of asking them about, do you like this color? That's not what this is. It's about asking them like the critical questions that, okay, we want to solve for this particular user. Like, do we have the bandwidth for it? Or we want to adapt this thing for this platform, or this thing, like we have this, in the case of, say, a developer, for instance, the developer is probably more worried about, latency. If I'm trying to introduce something and they're like, okay, no, it hurts us in this way, it makes it easier for a non-developer to actually understand what they're saying, as opposed to just interpreting it as them being, difficult, that they don't want to implement like whatever the change is. Oh yeah, and the last bit is to practically like invite engagements. Like I've given the example about trying to do a research. So right now the process that we've instituted in the team is to, of course, share often and share early. So if you're working on something, don't wait till it's done to share. Blast it on Slack. Let people give you feedback. It's not because it's not always going to be that they're going to give you feedback immediately on what you want, but you just want to raise awareness of existence. You want to make sure that they know that it's coming. So 1 month, 3 weeks, 2 weeks down the line, when the final thing is done, it's no longer a surprise. People have seen it before, and they've actually seen it repeatedly. So by the time it comes down to the point of, say, adding it to the backlog or weighing how much points to assign the story, it's not the first time they're seeing it, and they've done a better job, like, or they've had time to actually understand what is going on, and they're able to plan better, really. Okay, I think the slide is stuck. Oh yeah, so the last framing for this is the bit about communication, and it's really about finding the right artifacts for the right people at the right time. And by right artifacts, which ties closely back to what I talked about in building relationships. So if I am having a conversation, for instance, with the CEO of a company, right? As a designer, if I'm having a conversation with CEO, if the entire framing of the point I'm trying to make is about colors, grid, typography, um, white spacing, what? Even user research, right? If that's the entire framing that I'm using to have that conversation, or I'm trying to persuade that stakeholder to come to a different side of an argument, I am going to lose that argument. And simple, like you're going to lose the argument because the business leader is not interested in colors, um, typography, and all that. They have interest in it, but it's not priority. The priority is the product that we're building. How is it helping us, like, towards the bottom line? Are we moving? Are we acquiring customers? Are we, like, what are the key metrics that we want to look for? So if the job hadn't been done to try to understand, like, the upper funnel of, like, what are the key metrics or what are the key things that these different people are interested in, when you're then having conversations with different type of stakeholders, you miss out on the opportunity to then highlight those different things in a ways that is valuable to them. So if, for instance, I am talking to my product manager, right, I am well or better positioned to have those conversations in the context of the A/B test that we want to run, in the context of the bets we want to make, in the context of our OKRs, those kind of things. But if you are having the same conversation with, or if I'm having the same conversation with a designer, like, the framing changes, and the artifacts that I bring to those conversations also change. In the case of the product manager, you probably want to bring, like, a wireframe or, like, a prototype to show, like, the user journey, all of that. But if you're talking to a developer, yes, bring the user journey, but also, like, bring, like, documentation to let us know that, okay, is this part of the system? Do we need to build new components? Like, those are the kind of considerations. If you're talking to another designer, the designer is not interested in building the new components, right? They are interested in the visual fidelity of what you're showing them. Does it match the design system? How do other teams who depend on this particular, like, component or designs use it? What is the user experience? How did you come to this? So, like, the key here is, like, trying to understand the value or the things that other people find valuable at the start of the journey. It makes it easier for you further down the line as you transition through different phases of the journey. So if you are talking to, if you're trying to move people, if you're having an argument and trying to get people to buy into your side of the equation, it will be very, very helpful if you show up to those conversations or to those arguments with the right artifacts that you can show. And something, like, I pointed out an example of something that's, like, that introduced to the team, which is at IKEA, which is something that we now, like, have adopted. It's a simple note, right? So, and it's not complex. It's a simple note. It simply asks 3 questions. What is the context? What are the constraints? And then, is there anything else I need to know? This note is not for the designer. It's for the designer who is currently designing it, but it's also for any other person who opens up that design file. So if I come back to the file 5 months from now, odds are you've forgotten all the conversations that has gone in that has led to the point whereby you are, like, where that led to the point where the product is the way it currently is, right? It is the notes then help you to store that information as a way that you can reference, but also for any other person who wants to reference the file to come in and, like, get a sense of what is going on, and also try and understand, like, what the justifications are for whatever design decisions that you've chosen to make. So this is the point in the talk where there came a conflict, right? So I delivered this talk sometime like 2 years ago. This is my first time I'm doing this talk in 2 years. So I delivered this talk like sometime like two years ago, like maybe a little bit more. And then the question was, hey, like, are you not asking designers to do too much, right? Are you not saying that, oh, designers should, designers should be bridge builders, right? Trying to connect different parts of the team. And then the question stuck with me for a while, and I'd struggled to answer the question. And the truth is, because it is quite connected to the idea that it feels like designers are being, asked to do a bunch of different things just so they can validate that designers need to exist, right? Developers are just asked to code, right? That's it. That's the only expectation. But if you're a designer, you're asked to do research, you're asked to, draw user journeys, like you're asked to do all of those things, do, wireframe fidelity, manage stakeholders. But for developers, it's just the only expectation, right? It's the code. And when he said that, I'm like, yeah, I get what you're saying, right? And I struggled with the question for the longest time. But finally, I have an answer. And the answer is like, no, like this isn't necessarily targeted just for designers to participate, like to do. It's for everyone who participates in the development process. This is just a viewpoint from a designer, but anybody who is participating in the process, like, can adopt, these different ideas or these different things and implement it in a way that works for them. But also the reason why I felt like designers are being asked to do that is then because they are very well positioned to understand different sides of quote unquote the equation, whereby they have a user context, they also have a chance to understand the business context, and if they can leverage those two things, they have a better chance translating ideas to people in other roles who do not, have the same kind of visibility. But then, like, the way we collaborate is also changing, right? The rave on the internet in the last 2 weeks has been about chat.open.ai, right? The GP3. Like, how many people have tried it out? Okay, yeah, you've asked the weird questions, right? But yeah, so this is this AI engine by OpenAI that essentially takes a conversational approach to answering questions. So you can ask it anything. This is not that. This is just a playground still within OpenAI that uses one of their models to answer questions. But then when I said the landscape has changed, it is that the way we collaborate has changed, right? Previously, at least up until, I don't know, the last, I guess, 1 year or so, when you talk about collaboration, you're primarily talking about, human-to-human collaboration, right? But the age is quickly changing to the point whereby collaboration is not just for us as humans, but we also need to then figure out how do we work with these machines that, think faster than we do. And then what that relationship could be like. Is it the one whereby we work together to generate or get different ideas? There is this, I can't remember actually multiple universities have done these examples, which is using is it generative systems to then generate multiple designs of a particular item. The most common one that you find is for footwear, whereby someone crawled Amazon for Nike running shoes, I think, and then used AI to generate multiple versions of that. Is that what it then becomes? Whereby we use it to generate ideas and then throw it away and, come back. Or is it one that augments how we approach things? So the question that I screenshotted was asking the AI, what is the average time people spend on e-commerce websites versus non-e-commerce websites, right? if I was trying to solve a problem in that space, normally this is a conversation or question I would have gone to a data analyst to help me solve, right? To help me get this baseline. But this thing, I hope I'm generating correctly, is able to give me the answer in 30 seconds. Like you don't need to, I don't necessarily need to talk to someone. But it is just one of those things that is changing the way we collaborate, and it's just something to think about. I don't generally know how this will affect what collaboration looks like, to be honest. But I figured like it was worth pointing out. So if we go back to that original question, is everyone a designer? My answer would be it depends. And it's not a political answer, right? I'm not trying to be, please everyone. It depends. And it depends on how do you define design, right? Is it quote unquote capital D, where design is all about solving problems, is the strategy and steps that you take to solving problems? Or are you talking about design small d, whereby you're talking about creating visual artifacts that have articulated the solution to the problem? If you're talking about big D, like the capital D, then yes, everyone is a designer. Because for a product to work, we need to take multiple viewpoints. We need to consider multiple limitations. Limitations of technology, limitations of people, limitations of the medium that we want to use to deliver. And everybody who contributes to that process has, designed the product. But if it's a, small d, whereby we're more interested in examining how something looks and crafting what it feels like, then yeah, no, not everyone can do that. So I generally wasn't trying to be in the middle. Anyway, like I already said, like a product is a sum of compromises. So every product that you use is a bunch of people have come, fought, disagreed, agreed, negotiated, and came to an quote unquote compromise, because it's not an agreement. Because everywhere if you're working on any product, there's someone on the product team that isn't satisfied about something on the product. However, they've accepted it temporarily for now that is the version that what's it called, that customers get to see. So if as you go about your day and in your product life trying to make stuff happen, I hope that you do invest in the relationships, find the right artifacts to like convince and win the right arguments that you have, but also like bring people into your space and into your process really early, so that if you're talking about latency as a developer, if you're talking about latency to someone who isn't a developer, right? It makes sense to them why you're saying the word latency. Like it's not just an English word, like it means something. It has real world impact. And I think that is the end. Thank you.